We have a really interesting conversation. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to help you with strategies for standing up to power figures at work. This conversation is with SarahNicole Mahoney, Managing Director, Brand and Corporate Marketing. She's also the founder and the lead of the Women's ERG in her company. Welcome,
Thank you.
SarahNicole.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Power is something that we all struggle with sometimes, right? At some point in our
Mm.
careers. And everybody can relate to at some point experiencing some level of toxicity in a relationship, in a workplace, in an interaction. Has that ever come up with you?
Oh, multiple times. They were painful and uncomfortable and anxiety inducing. And yet I have come to recognize them as being essential building blocks to who I am happy with being today. I feel stronger. I feel more confident. I feel as though I can be a better advocate and champion for others who maybe were in those harder, darker places that I found myself in. And it took a lot of time for me to appreciate what I was able to take out of them, but it was hard. It was very hard.
It's definitely hard. And it seems like you were able to transform a hard experience into something positive that increased your empathy for other people. It made you better at
Yeah.
advocating for others who are going through a similar situation now in leadership and leadership in your role, but also leading this group of women. You're able
Yeah.
to better advocate and be that support that a lot of people need because you've gone
Yeah.
through the experience. You've had to reflect and deal with the experience. Let's get into this experience and talk a little bit about
Sure.
what that looked like.
Sure. Let's see. There's a few that probably rise to the surface for me because fundamentally, because they're stories that I have retold in the women's group that I founded, that I run with some amazing co-leads. Um, and funny, I might get to this at some point in our conversation. It was through the retelling of these experiences in which I very literally came to see that I needed to do this. So it was like a very direct result of reclaiming those experiences and the retelling. There's the two that come to mind. There's one happened fairly early in my career. For better or for worse, I have had a history in my career of being put on smaller, newer teams with not a lot of process put into it. Like, hey, we have this great idea. Do you want to try it? Do you want to do it? Do you want to be a part of it? And I'm always like, yeah, sure. What a, I love opportunities. I love trying to stretch and grow. And that has its own pros and cons to it. So early in my career, I came to find myself on a small new team that reported in to a couple of the C-suite folks, the executive team. And that was thrilling. I was like, wow, I'm pretty early in these days of being in marketing and branding and advertising work. And wow, I'm already working with the important people in the room. This is so exciting. And so I jumped at it. I said yes. And along with that came, oh, you're going to be on that team. That's great. But some of those folks have a bit of a track record of being pretty loyal to some rather problematic people in the company. And the problematic behaviors are on the long end. It was not to pick out genders, but the C team were all men. And the folks that they defended didn't call out were also men. And I was one of two women on a team of other men. So set the stage there a little bit. And so some of the problematic behaviors that were defended by my new C team, C suite bosses were sexual advances, propositions, inappropriate comments. So that ugly part of the world. And then also they were people who took credit for the ideas and work of folks that were not necessarily reporting directly to them, but were under as far as things went. So a lot of people did work, they took credit for it, or they would repeat even silly things like someone would speak quietly in a room and they would speak louder or speak last, and it was thought of as their idea. So it's like such typical, really toxic behaviors. But bottom line, I was thrilled to be on the team. And I decided I'm gonna reserve judgment until I experience this firsthand. I'm gonna be excited. This is a great opportunity. I can't believe I'm getting this opportunity so early. I'm gonna just go for it. Some time passed. Unfortunately, not really a lot of time passed. And I quickly started to observe and personally experience all of the problematic behaviors that I was warned about, in particular from one of the more senior folks on the team who was a man and who was one of the people that had always been protected, even in other companies that these folks had all worked together. They had traveled together and protected one another together. The feelings that came to me with this, oh gosh, I'm seeing this. It was a mix of feelings. I was crushed. I was sad that I was working with these people that were really successful and really smart, and I was learning so much from, and it was exciting, and I was being challenged. And then I was like, why do you have to be like that? That's so disappointing. My heart feels really, And then I was also nervous because it's really hard to navigate those situations on a day-to-day basis. And it made me angry. Like sometimes some of the really inappropriate comments or jokes, or like working on ad campaigns. That's a funny, raunchy room to begin with. And so adding that layer of toxicity of talking about different imagery for an ad campaign or different copy. It was just like, oh, that's not, or that's, and it was navigating that. Do I say something? Do I not say something? That was happening on a day-to-day basis. And then mixed in with all those feelings, I'm unsure of myself. Am I just not cut out to run with the big dogs? Am I being naive? Am I being parochial? Imposter. So imposter syndrome starts to really set in deep. And so I had on this tiny team, this little tiger team, I had become friendly with a couple of other women. I did a little gut checking on the fly. Hey, you ever have this happen to you? Or, wow, can you believe that he said that in that meeting? Did you think it was weird? Just trying to like validate, because it was really tricky to feel like my feelings were okay. Because I also didn't really want to not be on this team. It was like, so not surprising. Everyone felt the same way as I did. And everyone was like, yeah, that was uncomfortable. Or, yeah, that guy is a four-letter word, several four-letter words. What's the really horrible behavior? Yeah, it made me feel bad. And I was like, so then I sit with all of this in my head, and I, for better or for worse, was really raised by this small coven of very powerful women. Depression era, little Italian nonas, in addition to my own mother who passed away, but she spoke truth to power. She was a woman who spoke truth to power. And all of my great aunts were also that. And so I had that underpinning within me somewhere. So I'm mulling over my experience. I'm going through all of the feelings, and I'm like, okay, I got to talk to someone, but not directly to someone because that's still scary. So I went to a trusted manager who, not my direct manager, not on the team, but had been around enough. And she and I had a really good relationship. And I was like, hey, can I talk to you about something? This is weird. I have this great experience. I have this amazing opportunity. And she was like, yeah, nice job getting that. And I was like, it's not all it's cracked up to be. And I went through all of my experience. I shared it all with her. And she was very supportive. She was very supportive. She is a woman who maybe wasn't directly on those teams that I was seeking to be on, but she had a lot of power in the organization. And I think maybe she wasn't on some of those teams because she wouldn't tolerate that behavior. But at the time, I was like, maybe she's just not playing the game. And it was every day. It was this battle of, I'm not playing the game. I need to play the game. I can't play the game. Just that constant struggle, that wrestling with inside of me. So I felt supported. I felt validated. And she offered to go to HR on my behalf, which felt a little cowardly for me, but I was like, yeah, okay. I trusted her. And then she said she would do it. She said she'll let me know how it goes, what other next steps are there. And my anxiety was off the charts for the days that followed. I was like, oh, she's doing it. It's real. It's totally real. And I don't know, maybe it was a week, 2 weeks later, it wasn't long after she reported back. She said, I had a great conversation with HR and I think things are going to change. It's going to be great. Don't worry. So pretty soon, change did come, but not even remotely in the way that I wanted or expected. Slowly, insidiously, I started to notice things like meetings happening, and I heard about them afterwards. Phone calls happening with clients that I was conveniently unable to attend. But I always got, you know, here's what happened. Here are the key takeaways. Oh, here's what you missed. So I got reports from my manager. So it wasn't overt. It wasn't, but I'm not dumb. And I was like, oh, I know what's happening. And not being in these meetings, not being on these calls, and then getting the reporting out. It's not that it blocked my work, it just made it harder. And I am the kind of person that I feel like I say this, I've already said this one too many times, but for better or for worse, I am the kind of person that loves a challenge. I'm like, okay, this is going to be fine. Like, I'm not going to go through, I'm going to go around and it'll be fine. And I also was scared. I was even more scared that someone knew something, knew I had said something. And it was all these stories I was telling inside my head. And it slowly eroded my sense of self in that I wanted to still be on the team, but I wanted to be functioning small. Like I wanted to be as small as I could. I wanted to do great work, but I didn't want to be recognized for great work because then they would see me. And so if I started to, I don't know, make myself invisible, maybe I'd be safe and maybe everything would eventually start to get better. And I existed in this weird limbo of like functioning and not being in meetings and watching others be in meetings. Like I was so clearly being isolated from things, but it was so covert that I didn't know what to do. And I spent months like that in that role, in that job. And it really started to eat at me. And I was like, okay. And by chance, and I had spoken to that manager, the one who went to HR on my behalf. Like I spoke to her pretty regularly. It just like how are things going for some reason didn't really come up. And really just by chance, she was like, "Hey, I never asked you because you never really said anything. Like, have things changed? Like, have things gotten better?" And I said, "Yeah." And she knew me well enough to read me really well. And I'm a person who you ask a direct question, I will give you a direct answer. I'm like, I won't talk about it, but if you ask me about it, I can't not. And I said, actually, here's what's been happening. And I was even more scared to talk about that with her and tell her. But she was incensed. She was enraged. She couldn't believe that's what happened. And she said, oh, clearly they know. And this is ridiculous. This had gone to a place that was almost would be considered retaliation, but it was so hard to document. And now, of course, years later, I find out how common this is, like that covert retaliation. But she marched right back to HR and escalated it within HR. And added this new information of behaviors and experiences and demanded a formal investigation. And I was sick to my stomach because she said the formal investigation is happening and you are going to have to speak about what's going on. And they're going to be talking to you and they're going to be talking to your bosses and other people on the team. And this is, and I was like, I didn't know that was going to happen. And you're legally protected. You are legally protected, but it is very scary. And I understand that. And I guess I could say that I had this incredible good fortune of her standing at my side. And not everybody has that, but she stood at my side and she couldn't come with me to the meetings with the investigation, but stood outside the door like a mom watching her kid go into the first day of school and talked to me afterwards and talked me up the ledge several times. And it was amazing because what it opened up was that so many other women came forward, women even that had been on their teams previously, women that weren't directly on their teams but felt impacted by the behaviors. And ultimately, they were folks that were the most responsible, were allowed to resign, which wasn't fully like it didn't fully make me feel great because I was like, I want everyone to know that they were fired. But that's just not always how the world works. But I think once it came to light that this was not only problematic, but also a risk for the company, they it was resolved. And it's funny, the experience I'm having right at this moment of retelling this story in this environment, it is a very similar experience I had the first time I told the story to a group of women I was working with many years later. And I can feel how scared I was just telling the story. Like I can feel my heart pounding through my chest. And I don't know, like it's if someone stays in the same industry, you are probably going to come across people, sometimes the same people that you called out again. And it can be really frightening, but can also be very empowering and that you know that you did the right thing for yourself. I did the right speaking and the I voice. I did the right thing for me. And it helped me to find a way to be stronger when I found myself or watching other people in similar situations later on in my career. And those toxic folks are everywhere. I've been in many organizations since then and many bosses, and it is still so pervasive. It's amazing, even in the current culture we are now, where there are so many more opportunities to have a voice and speak up and call in and quite frankly call out like I this was wrong, this was done to me, this is not okay. And for me, I have found ways to find my voice to call out injustices. That voice is easier to access for me now. And I find myself encouraging others to find that voice before they need it, because it is very easy to find yourself in these situations. And it's it was really that coming together. If I could think back on that situation, it was the thing that helped me feel the bravest. It wasn't just that wonderful manager standing outside the door and knowing she was there. It was the collective voice of other women coming forward and sharing the experience, and women early in the investigation that were saying like, no effing way, like no way am I jumping into that investigation. That is a career. Like, no, I'm going to be fired. I'm going to be scared. But through the modeling of us, some of us finding a way to have those conversations with HR and speaking to our experiences, we all became more powerful. And we're all still in contact with each other too. It's amazing. And I think it's that finding others to connect with about these experiences and I don't know, building that it's not okay voice together. It has to start with smaller singular voices, but When you find others, it's incredible. So that was a long telling of a story.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing. It takes a lot of courage to do what you did. It takes a lot of courage to share this right now. Every time you share it, it takes courage because it's so intense and you were scared of retaliation, you were scared of consequences, you were scared of losing your job as a result. It's incredibly scary. There's still the fear that it's a small industry at the end of the day. Will
Yeah.
you encounter these people again?
And I am the breadwinner of the house too.
Oh
My husband was a stay-at-home dad. That was a whole other added extra layer of pressure. And I apologize for interrupting you, but it was really scary. I was a new mom, single
gosh.
income, and I'm doing this. So I did not have a safety net of a second income necessarily. My husband was doing freelance and he's a writer. So it was very scary. Not only could I lose my job, like we could really be in trouble as a family. And that was really scary.
I think a lot of people will relate to the way you shared it, to wanting to shrink yourself so much, like that movie, right? What's it called? Shrink.
Yeah, yeah. It was
Honey, you shrank
real.
my kids or something.
Yeah. Honey, you shrank my soul. Like
My soul, right?
it was
You
horrible.
wanted to be invisible.
Yeah.
What we want for this world is for the voices of those who are trying to do their work or doing their best or bring their contribution to be heard, to be amplified, to grow. I mean,
Yeah.
you have here my amplified voices. So it's so troubling to see you're in a situation, and many women are in a situation, and many people are in a situation where the only way they feel safe is if they're invisible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's going to ultimately limit your career, your
Hmm.
income,
Hmm.
your ability to have an impact because it takes visibility to do those things. And so if you're in a situation, you're cornered and
Yeah.
you feel like the only solution is to be invisible because everything else is risky.
Yeah. And being invisible in this incredibly new opportunity where you have to prove yourself every day and you
Yes.
have to take risk. I was on a new team with new configurations of humans working on incredibly high budget accounts and very high profile brands. It did not help my career to want to be small, but it also helped my career to want to be small. It was just so fraught and so confusing a state to live in on a daily basis for months. It's unbelievable.
Every possible individual that you could speak to, there was associated risk.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that associated risk started to unfold as you went through the process because you had never gone through this process before
yeah,
of reporting, going through these investigations with HR
yeah, I know.
and then being forced to talk openly, like you're in like a prison cell and you have to
Yeah,
confess.
so accurate. Accurate.
It's really stressful. And
Yeah,
you already had the full anxiety and stress being built through these months and months of going through this.
yeah.
And then on top of that, how long did this because usually investigations take a while.
Oh, it was probably another 2 months.
So the whole
It,
process was what, like 6 months
yeah,
or
yeah, roughly. And then I was still working under these.
that's right. It doesn't
They
end.
didn't replace these my managers. They didn't replace the team. I was still
Um,
working with these people closely on high pressure, doing high pressure stuff within that. It's just, I'm laughing like the way I would laugh when I'm really nervous about something because it's so visceral thinking about it and telling the story. It sounds so bananas. Wow. I can't believe that I was functioning within that space. My brain must have been like drinking from the fire hose of cortisol. It was so stressful. It was
and
so stressful.
and were you showing up to work physically or was this a remote work
Oh yeah.
time?
Oh yeah. In the same room.
In the same room.
In the same we were it was I
Oh my
mean,
gosh. Okay,
the
that's important
corporate
that's
space.
important context there because it's
Oh,
really hard to
yeah.
be invisible when you're in the same room.
Yeah, this was before remote
Yeah, that's right.
work.
That's right.
Let me date myself a little bit for your audience. I'm almost
That's
50.
true. It's
Yeah, it was a
crazy.
different world. And it was like smiling and, hey, I'm gonna grab a coffee. Anyone want one? It's just, I felt every day I was in a horrible play.
Imagine like waking up. So when Monday morning came, or every morning when you woke up and you knew
Hmm.
that you had to get ready to go to
Hmm.
that place, that room,
Yeah,
where those people were going to be, where those emotions were going to take place, where that fear was going to be in every single moment, every single word that you uttered. It's a bit of a hell situation because
totally.
you're always anxious and you start to not look forward to work, which is where we spend most of our time. And you, as
Oh,
the
yeah.
breadwinner,
The Sunday scaries were like the worst horror movie. And like, oh, Monday's coming. It was just, and these were people who had a history of being able to not only exhibit these behaviors, but get away with them. So there was a bit of an arrogance. I was the fearful one, and they absolutely preyed on it. And I came from a childhood with parents who had substance abuse, a parent who had a substance abuse issue. And I learned very early on how to smile and pretend everything was okay. And so I absolutely reached as deeply as I could into that programming and those survival tactics that I had learned as a child. And I used them day to day because it was like, I'm just going to look brave. I'm going to feel like I want to just shrivel up every day, but I'm also going to be brave. And it was, I don't know if I don't, thinking back, I don't know. One of the hardest parts that I didn't appreciate at the time because I was just in it is that multiplicity of existence that I was in anytime I was around the others. I was like, I'm brave. I want to be small. I'm freaking out. I'm so angry because some of them were still doing all of the things. It's not like they changed. Nobody changed their behavior. It was just, and it was surreal. So I just, every day, it was predominantly this just, I don't know, psychosphere of emotions just like swirling around. And then I was also trying to do a really good job at my job. And the thing is, I know there are countless other people
yes.
that go through this every day.
Yeah.
It's horrible how normalized that state is. And I hope a remote environment maybe has helped it, or at least we can escape it a little bit. But the behaviors, the toxicity is still there. But the swimming in it maybe has been slightly mitigated if someone is working in a remote environment. But I don't think the feelings are mitigated, but you can compartmentalize perhaps a little more effectively. But I don't know.
It's
It was a
something
lot.
that is tough because it's happening to a lot of people and people are not talking about it because it's such a scary experience even to talk about it. I want to recap some of the things that you shared to go through this
Sure.
process, which was new to you. And now it's a little
Yeah.
bit easier for you to advise other women because you've been through it. But when you've never experienced it before, it's incredibly scary and you don't really know what to do. But
Yeah.
in your story, you first you started noticing this. Instead of just immediately going to speak to someone, you decided to observe a little bit and
Yeah.
experience it to be sure about it. And
Yeah.
then when that happened, then you went to a trusted person who you had a relationship with. You felt like you could trust her with this information
Yeah.
and you shared it. And then she helped you choose a path and take that next step.
Yeah.
But then things didn't quite work out the way you're expecting. At that point, you were even scared of sharing with her the fact that the problem wasn't solved.
Yeah. And it almost escalated in a way. It did. It did escalate in a way.
It did. It did escalate because that's what you were scared of. Am I going to make this thing worse by talking about it again. Her
Yeah.
intention was good to try to help, but it seemed like it really didn't. Other bad things are happening. So what do I do here? And
Yeah.
ultimately, you did share with her. It did go to HR, and then you were demanded to do something that you weren't comfortable with, which was to talk about it openly
Yeah.
and
I
in all these investigations. But luckily, she supported you in that process. She was really great in supporting,
yeah.
waiting there at the end, taking you there,
Yeah.
waiting, debriefing the session with you
Yeah.
afterwards, being there for you. That's probably the best thing she could have done. I think that's a great example as well in supporting others to go through this process. And courage came from talking to other women and asking them if they were going through something similar to
Yeah.
validate your experience before you took the next step. You found courage to speak up in those investigations by knowing that other women were also speaking up and you weren't alone and you had the power of the group to
Yeah.
support you in what you were saying. And
Yeah.
ultimately, luckily, it worked out.
I would say, and this is really occurring to me in a crystallized way now, if I could go back and do anything different,
Yes.
I would still take the opportunity to join the team. That
Oh,
wouldn't have
okay.
that wouldn't have changed. What I believe would have helped the process a little bit more is, and I don't know how I would have done this, but I believe it could have gone to a better place faster if I had gone directly to HR myself and not asked for a translator. I believe that I could have had that manager come with me when I went
Hmm.
to A instead of her going there for me. I don't believe anyone can speak for me better than me. And I don't doubt that she didn't speak with nothing, with total integrity and did the best job she could in advocating for me and explaining what I was going through. But if I had been the one in the room telling that story, I believe I could have controlled the action, or I could have had an influence and an impact in what came next. And you can't go back, but I do believe that if something is happening to me, I need to be the one to tell that story. And I absolutely do that now. And I advocate for that now. And I offer to go with people. I have in roles and companies since then, which is why I can say with total certainty that I know these things still happen. Being your own advocate is everything. Because I think through telling the story, as I have with you now, as I have with others in the recent past, there are things that can rise to the surface within the telling of the story that you may not realize were there. And they can be very powerful and they can be very effective and they can really help change the path forward of what comes next. If I could go back in time, I believe that's something I would have done. I don't know how, but I wish
Yeah,
I had.
that is absolutely beautiful. Looking back on what you could have done, obviously there's a lot of emotions going on, but let's say now the new version of you having gone through the experience, that's what you could do going forward. That's how you would
Yeah.
re-evaluate the situation. And that's probably what you're advising to other people. And what I really like about what you said, and is absolutely true, we are our best advocates. And part of that is keeping the control over the
Yeah.
important conversations in our lives. Because when we delegate the most important conversations, then we delegate the outcomes.
Yeah.
You feel like, as hard as it was, you having been the person there talking to HR, you could choose the words, the elements, ask the questions, clarify what was going to happen next, seek an
Mm-hmm.
agreement. There's a lot more that you could have done to mold the outcome and the next steps to something that you were comfortable with versus what happened was it's settled. I talked to HR, great, but then you didn't even know what was going to happen next. And at that point, you had no control over what was going on because you weren't there
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
conversation. So that's very insightful. That's very insightful.
Thank you. Yeah. No one knows me better than me. And
and what you want and
that's,
what you're comfortable with.
yeah. Yeah. And that's owning power.
Yes.
It's funny. I had a conversation just I don't know, a day or two ago with someone pretty new here at my organization. And she had come to me just because we are a fully remote company where I work. And there's a lot of great culture building and advocacy to, oh, you want to talk to someone? Send them a Slack, set up a meeting, set up a call. And so there's a woman who I really like. She's fantastic. She asked for one of those calls and she was like, hey, um, can we talk? I'm getting this. She in particular, she wanted to talk to me because she kept getting this feedback from her manager, which was like, you need to, in her reviews, stuff like reviews or even just like one-on-ones, you need to find your executive presence. You need to build your executive presence. You need to find your executive voice. And she's, so what does that mean? Like, I know what it means, but how do I do that? I was like, that is a great question. And it really got me thinking that there's the whole fake it till you make it kind of advice you hear from one hears from time to time. And I believe that if one is going to have an executive presence and an executive voice with power and that can be wielded effectively, it has to come from within. It has to come from something that's real and, I don't know, visceral and something you can just feel inside of yourself. I don't see how it comes any other way and it actually having any efficacy. And I think it comes to all of us in different ways. And I don't know though if there's any pattern to it. It's that overcoming, it's those moments where we overcome fear and great challenge or trauma or just doing something really hard for a long period of time. I work in these days, I work in ed tech and it's new frontiers every other week. We have AI coming in. There's just like emerging technology everywhere. And so every day is really hard, regardless of what team you're on. And even just if I were to say finding your own executive voice through something not traumatizing, that can just be finding the moments and space to recognize your wins and recognize your own moments of success and hey, look, I did that. Hey, look, I started that. I participated that. I led that. Any of the things that precede that, and you can point to and feel good about. It's something that just has to be real and
Yeah.
that is recognized. I think it's that recognition that is key. You can't just go through them and then they're forgotten or you don't give it that
God.
moment that it deserves. Yeah, that honor, the honoring those
Like you're
moments, those,
honoring right now your story,
yeah,
and you have been honoring your story, and your story has also helped you figure out a little bit more about yourself and develop that executive voice and develop your own voice
yeah.
through reflection, as painful as it is. But it has elevated your voice because you went there. And I think that's another great learning from this beautiful, beautiful, hard, tough, but beautiful in the sense that you shared it with us and you share your learnings with us. A lot of people need to hear this. I really appreciate you doing that for us.
Absolutely. I appreciate you giving me the space to have that recognition. It's a powerful experience.
It is, and it's going to help a lot of people who are currently silently struggling and trying to be invisible find
Yeah.
a path, a voice, and figure out what to do without having to quit or disappear or not participate. So I appreciate that.